Hi, I'm Ramsey and I'm a podcast producer over at StoryKeep. For most of my career, I've had the pleasure of learning about people's life stories through interviews, documentaries, and podcasts. And when StoryKeep came to me about producing a private podcast here in Atlanta, Georgia, I jumped at the opportunity. What that is basically I've been interviewing a gentleman here and learning about his life story and his legacy. Through various interviews and, just spending time with him, I've been able to learn so much about him. And then I take those interviews and I make those into individual podcasts for his family, friends, and loved ones to be able to listen to and appreciate and to remember the good things about him and learn about things they have never even heard of. And it's through preserving his life story, we're able to preserve his legacy for generations to come. And it even impacts the community when people who don't know the gentleman listen to it. So if that sounds like something you would be interested in, for us to go in and do a private podcast for someone that you love or someone that you serve, please reach out to us because we believe everyone has a story to tell.
Welcome to Who We Remember. I'm Jamie Younger, the founder of StoryKeep, and your host for this podcast. First, let me say how delighted I am to have you joining us for the show. This is a place where we have uncommon conversations about things that matter deeply to most of us, the people we love, and the purpose we give to our own lives and legacies. Our mission at StoryKeep is to capitalize on the power of story for profound good in families of wealth. Since 2010, we've partnered with over 100 families worldwide, creating personal films and private podcasts that help a family navigate their shared narrative. Our work is designed to deepen connections. My conversations on this podcast center around two questions. First, I ask my guests this: whose life story from their family would they most want to see documented on film? And the second, what are they as a person and as a professional hoping to create and leave behind? Today, I'm honored to welcome Tim Brown to the podcast. Tim is the founder of TTB, a bespoke strategic advisory serving families across private capital markets, governance, and generational leadership. He is also a partner and global co-head of family office services at Berkowitz Pollack Brandt, and a co-founder of multiple initiatives that connect and support global families, including Fortaleza and Somos 22. Tim is here to talk about his mother, a strong and values-driven woman who grew up in South Florida and faced life with grit, grace, and generosity. A two-time cancer survivor, she devoted herself to helping other women navigate similar challenges, even as she faced her own terminal diagnosis. She passed away when Tim was just 30, but the wisdom she instilled in him continues to shape how he moves through the world. One of her most lasting messages: you can lose everything in life but your good name. As a kid, Tim was already showing signs of the entrepreneur he'd one day become. In 7th grade, he ran a gum business at school, an early hustle that came full circle when his own son started selling handmade wallets and inventing new ways to keep customers coming back. Watching that spirit come alive in the next generation became sort of a kind of legacy all of its own. So please do settle in. You're about to hear a remarkable story and meet someone authentic, brave, and deeply focused on what matters. This is Who We Remember. Let's dive in. So Tim, welcome to Who We Remember. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Jamie. Great to be here.
Yeah, I right before we got on, you had shared kind of your mood, your feeling about talking about your mom today. And I was just hoping you would start by talking about that a little bit. Your mom was Carol, and she passed away quite a long time ago now. So, yeah, how does it feel to re-engage, touch in with her?
Thanks. Yeah, my mother died a little over 25 years ago. And when you and I met and I had the opportunity to really think about talking about her today, just brought up a lot of memories, and also maybe just how much I've changed as a person in the last 25 years. Almost wish I could, maybe a lot of people think this, rewind the tape and go back to some moments that
Yeah.
maybe change the narrative. But at any rate, we are where we are. I guess that's the whole point of being on your path. But this is exciting.
Mm.
And I know that my mother would love this. If you were here.
What would she love about it?
She was always, I'm sure every parent in the world loves to see their children grow and be successful and find their own way. And my mother gave me a lot of latitude, and a lot of love. And, and sometimes, maybe unfiltered with how she felt about things. On, but, it's, I think there were a number of things that shaped her. She moved when she was in second grade from Reading, Pennsylvania to South Florida, and the Miami and then the Fort Lauderdale area. And I think that really also shaped her, of just the adjustment at that age of leaving where all of the family were, and then being in a completely new place. But at any rate, when I look back at her and some of the things that occurred, I feel like she was always very good with what I would call kitchen table wisdom. Just very simple type things to understand. And I also appreciated that she has had a lot of levity. Like I was thinking back to some of my favorite memories of her, and it seemed like it always came back to, singing in the car,
Mm.
or being spontaneous and going on road trips, or her finding something very interesting at a garage sale in a neighborhood. And anyway, as we get into some other aspects of the conversation, there are certainly different places I'd like to spend some time. But anyway,
Yeah. She sounds like she was just kind of in life, and enjoying what was in front of her. If it was like a tune on the radio or just something that delighted her at a garage sale, that she was sort of up for it. Is that how you would describe her, or were there
yeah,
other layers there?
no, I think simplicity in that regard, and then just having a lot of fun with that simplicity, a lot of
Mm.
joy. And I think that she was good at also finding, what I think of as sort of, the nooks, the little small things in life that are really special. And
Mm.
what do they call it? The nooks and crannies of different things.
That's where the butter goes if you have an English muffin, right? So you gotta have those nooks. That's where the delicious stuff gets stuck in, right?
That's totally it. That's totally it. I
Uh,
agree.
so it's always fun. I love doing this because we're always in an imaginative place about having the chance to have your mom be interviewed and tell some of her, or all of her life story on film. And in that exercise, in that mental exercise, to think about now, especially in hindsight, what are the sort of top things that spring to mind when you think about your mom that you would really like to have asked her, or to the stories that you would want her to tell?
Yeah, thank you. I It's interesting. My mother fought breast cancer um the first time for almost 5 years, and we thought, this is when she was in her early 40s, and we thought she beat it. And I was living in Australia at the time, and I called her from Perth, Australia, which is a long, long way away from Atlanta, Georgia, where she was.
Mm.
And I remember her telling me that it had come back, and that, they were surprised because I think she was like at right at the 5-year mark.
Mm.
And the interesting thing about that journey for her is she never complained about it. Like, I think she still continued to find things in life to laugh about, things that brought her joy. But it really created this expansion in her, where when I think of like three things that define my mother, I think it's generosity, courage, and inspiration to others. And you saw it at her funeral,
Mm.
where there were probably 100 or more women who were breast cancer survivors, all at different stages, who came there to show respect to the time, and the love and attention that she had put into each of them in developing their own friendships. What I would call, really this unique sisterhood, to that. And that really, in ways that I was not maybe expecting at the time, I think has really shaped me, about how you show up in the world and, ultimately, um, what you want to be remembered for. So,
Mm.
uh,
Mm. One of the things I always think about when we have these conversations are the scenes that you would have liked to have captured. And I don't know if I were the one making the movie, I would want to capture that scene actually at the funeral, where all of these women were. That would be an incredible way of honoring her, I think. Um, but thinking back on your childhood and early adulthood, are there particular scenes or moments that if you just had 30 seconds of a clip of your mom, like what you would just love to have captured of her spirit?
yeah. Um, I think it's a little bit of a collage, but for whatever reason, the two of us always got into really meaningful conversations in uh, this 1970 Volkswagen Bug that was yellow, pale yellow, that she had bought brand new in Fort Lauderdale in 1970. And it made it all the way to Denver, Colorado when we moved to Colorado. What's out there for a long time. Um, and so that 30-second clip of my life would be sitting in the front seat with her and having conversations as I became more mature, losing a soccer game and not really understanding how to hold that at the time because I was 9. Um,
Mhm.
and her being patient and kind of walking through, um, how to look at it differently. And conversations about, uh, your first time girlfriend, and having her give her thoughts on, just different things. So that would be my 30-second. What if
Yeah.
this is spending time in a car, whether singing together or just simply talking about life. I don't know what it is about. I kind of find it's the same thing when you go for a walk with somebody, where I, like, you can just talk about anything. Maybe it's because you're not looking
Hmm.
at each other; you're looking straight.
Yeah.
But it seems like things are much more fluid and they just come out.
And moving, and yeah, it completely makes sense. There's almost any.
And like, and just the spontaneity, like I remember when we moved to Colorado, my mother and I were driving in the Volkswagen, and I was 9, and she said, or maybe I just turned 10, and she said, why don't we just keep driving on I-70 West and let's go ski today? and it was completely unexpected. And so the first time that I ever went skiing with her was 100% spontaneous. It was just because we were on I-70. That was an idea that went through her head. And we went and we spent the day at Keystone. And I recently found the pictures in an old box that I have here in Miami of that day, and her
Mm.
taking pictures of me on the little bunny hill learning how to ski. But I just appreciated that. That's a pretty cool memory. So that would be my greatest hits would probably be those conversations that we have and how special they really were.
Mm. Um, what would you today, if she were to just walk into this room where you are, sitting in, and she sat down, and I have this image that you sent to us of her in a yellow dress. I believe it was a yellow
Yeah,
dress.
that's right.
Such a beautiful spirit emanating from her in that image. So she walks in, and let's just say that she walks in that yellow dress. Um, I'm sure you would have things you would want to tell her, like how her grandchildren are doing and that you love her. And but what do you think you would want to ask her today, if you could?
That is such a great question. You know, I feel like it's interesting. There was a time where I felt like maybe I wasn't as proud of my roots and where I came from.
Mm.
And then when I was in my early 30s, I married into a family of a lot of wealth. And and I guess maybe I almost felt like I wasn't good enough. Like I'm so embarrassed to even bring this up. Uh, and I think I would have, if I could have asked my mother anything, I think it would have been related to, what would you suggest in terms of a great way to live a healthy life within all this? Uh,
Within the
and I think
con.
I finally, yeah, just holistically, and I think I figured that out over time. But I for so long, and I wrote a book about this. I think I equated who I was as a person with what I did for a living. And I think that's inconsistent with the way my mother viewed the world. Like I think my mother, if she had been alive, would have said, I think you're stepping into dangerous ground, and would have seen it. Um, so I don't know, you asked her, that's a hard question. Um, and that's probably what I would have asked her is, if you could fast forward to the Tim that's age 40, what would you tell me about how I was living my life? Uh, and, some of the things to keep me centered.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Like she had such a great way, as I mentioned, of just levity, but also celebrating the small things. And also making family a priority. And I mean like the extended family, like calling people, writing letters, getting involved in their lives. And I think it's sometimes those are I'm going to be careful with the word here. I think it could be easy to take those for granted, that those relationships, because it's family, are just going to always be around. Um, and I don't think that's true. I think you've got to put love and sunshine and water, and you've got to continue to cultivate those. And she was really good at that. And at age 55, I think I'm starting to realize a much greater degree about why that was such a priority for her.
Mm, yeah. Takes time to sink in.
Well, I've always been a slow learner, I guess, in that regard.
Um,
Yeah.
I'm curious. I have some notions about this from what you've shared, but I'm curious what you would say to this, which is what value or belief do you feel like guided her or defined her that's now in you?
Yeah. Thank you. My mother always said two things to me, and that really relate back to what I would classify that, character is everything. And, it there's this quote, I quote John Wooden a lot, by the way. And so uh, I couldn't have one interview go by where I didn't quote John.
I've been warned. Okay. Yeah.
But, he has this great quote that success is never final. Failure is never fatal. It's courage that counts. Um, and and I think my mother had a similar type of way when it was related to character. Um, and it was the world owes you nothing, and you can lose everything but your good name. And so, the choices that you make are important because it relates back to your character. And I think there's this relationship that we have with ourselves and how we view ourselves in the world and respect ourselves and have confidence, that emanate from, you know, I think the decisions that you make related to your good name. It's not, you're not doing it for other people first. You're doing it for yourself first.
Hmm.
That's just the code, that you've chosen to live by. And I was having this conversation with my 22-year-old son. We do an annual father-son trip, which was last week. And and he said he just graduated from college. He's now getting ready to start his first, I don't want to call it real job, but it's kind of job out of college.
Yeah.
And and so we were talking about how you show up in that relationship and the expectations, and can you be counted on? Are you accountable? Um, and that, uh, it matters. And so all that goes back to the conversations and my mother's kind of simple wisdom around losing everything in life but your good name. Uh, and I think maybe when we're younger, some of the values that we have may not necessarily be our own. And over time, we figure out what those values mean to us, and they do become our values, and they manifest in different ways because of that. But it's teachers who show up earlier in our life who kind of help guide us down that path. And so I felt like there was a part of my mother who was talking to my son this past week when we were on our father-son trip, and having these deep conversations while we were driving or while we were, you know, walking and doing some different things.
You were metaphorically on your way to the ski slopes with the Volkswagen. Yeah. Um,
Definitely, definitely.
um, I have to say I'm struck by you sharing how your mom had spent so much time connecting with individuals on a personal level and keeping those networks happening, such that 100 women showed up at her funeral. And given part of your work, but I think an important part of your work these days of bringing different um, family office professionals together in
Yep.
really unique, human-centered ways. I see a through line there. And I wonder if you might talk about that part of your work and what you feel like is at the core of that work and maybe how it echoes back to your mom.
Yeah, thank you for that. Um, I family is family, and I realize that you know family office have lots of different meanings to different people, but at the end of the day, it's really about family, in many respects. And I think that having emotional intelligence, um, in addition to fundamental intelligence, are both equally valuable and important, because there is a balance between the function on a business side of what a family office does, but also the softer side of what a family office is doing, and how you ultimately impart the values that not only created the wealth, but also have kept the family together in those traditions, and how those get passed down generationally. And so, uh, when I think about just the awareness of how we show up in the world and the types of questions that we ask, that's I think the core to my work is I like to serve other people, and I like to see them, um, I'd like to genuinely help people with some type of challenge that they may have. Uh, and I think, the world is a circle, and the things that we do come back to us in the seeds that we plant. But I equally believe that we plant trees for the next generation for the shade, um, and that we all have a role that we can play, um, related to that. So I kind of think of, I went through this exercise one time, and it'll come back to family office here in just a minute. But uh, the question was, what do you want? And I remember, it was so powerful. I was working with a teacher on this, and I had to distill it down into a sentence and to be able to defend it. And I brought it into my YPO form because the experience had been that changing for me, that all of us then went through this exercise over the course of a year together. And what I learned is, there's three things that fundamentally drive me in life. Um, and I think these are all things that manifest as well into the work that I do in family offices, whether that be front of the house related things or back of the house related things, or governance, or 100-year plans, or whatever that might be. But I'm at my best self when I'm creating, when I'm learning, and when I'm loving. And if I have those three things, my joy is at the highest level it can be. And so I think, to me, when I'm able to ask questions or make introductions to different resources, or bring in the perspective of, some of the work that I've done, um, it's a way for me to create potentially a better outcome for someone, just by simply being able to bring in a different experience share to it. Um, and I love that work, and ultimately learn from it, and that feeds itself. And so, when I think of the Mark Twain quote that the greatest 2 days in any person's life are the day you're born and the day you figure out why you were born. Uh, what I do now in my life is exactly what I think I was put on earth to go do. And so back to my mother, it's amazing how simple the that statement of, creating, learning, and loving may be. But it's fundamentally what brings me the most joy. And interestingly enough, all three of those are free. Uh, so, and I hope that for my own son, that, he realizes that we are at our highest and best selves when we're creating. And I've worked very hard for him, who, will be a principal at a family office. I've worked very hard with him to try and prepare him that, uh, we are, if we are in our highest and best selves when we're creating, what do you want to create? And we want, confidence to come from that, not arrogance, but confidence. And, I think also from that, when you have that kind of confidence level, you can do good things quietly. Um, and, and I think the belief, right, that, uh, ultimately God sees everything that we do, um, uh, is something that, I also want him to, to think about. And my mother was very much that way with me. And so, all of that kind of goes back to what I do in the family office world is, I genuinely care about, the longevity of families. And I think there are, things that make families very different. And then there are things, that are similar. And, so there's portability in some aspects, to it. I think we all like to create, learn, and love. That's just, how you unlock that.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. As I'm kind of hearing all of this and thinking about you as a person who sat at your mom's funeral pretty early in your own life, um, and you've been on this road of a very purposeful career, and you're halfway through life, let's call it that. We want you to live long.
I hope so.
So you've got a long runway here. But I am wondering how you want to be remembered now, having had the fortunate, unfortunate opportunity to see how your mom has been remembered, at least in your own heart. How do you want to be remembered?
Uh, so within Somos 22, right, the family office group that Brian Adams and I, co-founded, one of the things that we do are Jeffersonian dinners, right? These moderated dinners, which I love. Just to hear the collective wisdom of everybody at the table. And so I like to also quote Thomas Jefferson. Some
Naturally.
things. Yeah, imagine that. But I mean, one of his greatest quotes is really talking about, he was like, I prefer to be remembered for what I have done, for others, not for what others have done for me. And I think that was probably a lot of the driver too, behind the Jeffersonian dinners. Like, I think he knew that he could pull out, really incredible details and wisdom from people, and that ultimately the world would benefit from that. There was a time, in the Western world when Thomas Jefferson had read every single book that had been written. Uh,
That's
and,
mind-boggling.
that's mind boggling. Yeah, that statistic. But he wasn't out talking about that. He was out, trying to curate insightful conversations with other people, and I think bring out the best in people. And so when I think about how do I want to be remembered, it's definitely that. I want to be remembered as somebody, that you could trust, somebody that could provide love and wisdom, someone that was consistent, and Ultimately, I think that's it. I would love to be able to pay it forward the way other people have paid it forward for me. Um, and I find, right, that it's kind of like, when you think about philanthropy and why it feels so good, like I think it's at the heart of it, it's really about it's about creation, right? You're creating a better outcome for other human beings, but you're also creating, I think, a better version of yourself by seeing the interconnection that we all have uh,
Hmm.
here on the earth, and being in relationship. And so I'd like to be remembered as somebody who was a student of that type of thinking, and somebody that was, very focused on joy, especially maybe some decisions that I made earlier in my life that were not the healthiest decisions at the time. But we are where we are at our path, and I think ultimately our job is to learn and to ultimately get better and to continue down that journey. And that's what I'd like to be remembered for. Versus, it probably won't. It probably won't be for you know business stuff.
Yeah, let's hope it's greater than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe the vehicle, but not the destination.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's the
Yeah.
unique thing, right, about what we get to do. Like in this world that I'm in, I talk to the most dynamic people every single day, all day long. And it's really cool. Like I feel very fortunate.
Hmm. Yeah, and to be able to hopefully add something even more to that person's ability if they are inspired and generous to help them be more of that, right? In the position and what you're doing. So, um, I have to say, um, I've really liked learning just a little bit about your mom today, and I will forever keep
Thank
this
you.
image of her in a yellow dress, and in my mind, she will be wearing that yellow dress in a yellow bug, heading into the mountains, Carol. And um, I just want to genuinely say that this conversation has buoyed my soul. Um, Thank you for sharing from the heart and being so human about work that isn't always framed that way. Um, Thank you so much.
Jamie, thank you for again having me. This has been a lot of fun. A lot of fun.
Beautiful.